Man, this entire situation just keeps getting messier and messier by the day, bro. And honestly, this is exactly what happens when people start sacrificing morals just to secure a bigger bag. Like I always say, every dollar ain't good money. Soon as word got out that Big Bank sat down with 6ix9ine for an interview, social media instantly started looking at him crazy. Because let's be real here. For years now, 6ix9ine has been trolling ATL rappers nonstop, disrespecting people, throwing rat allegations around, calling out street dudes, and doing everything in his power to bait somebody into reacting publicly. But most of those artists refused to entertain him. They stayed quiet, ignored the trolling, and never gave him the viral moment he wanted. And you could tell that started frustrating him heavy. So eventually 6ix9ine basically changed his strategy completely. He probably looked at the situation like, okay, if the younger rappers won't respond to me directly, let me go through somebody they all respect instead. And that's allegedly when Big Bank became the target. Because in 6ix9ine's mind, getting access to Big Bank's platform meant forcing himself back into Atlanta conversations, whether people liked it or not. And what really shocked people was finding out that this interview wasn't even recent. Apparently, the footage had been sitting unreleased for around 4 months, while Big Bank kept debating if dropping it was even worth the backlash. And y'all already know how that usually goes. When somebody keeps questioning a decision after making it, deep down they probably already know it wasn't sitting right with their conscience. Then things got even crazier when Big Bank started joking online, saying he needed counseling after the interview backlash exploded everywhere. He was clowning around saying he had to gather a support group because all the criticism had him mentally spiraling. He brought in names like Dubry from Dallas, Ray Daniels, DJ Scream, and Play from Atlanta to basically talk him through the situation publicly. He laughed about it, but people could still tell there was real pressure behind those jokes. Because once the internet starts questioning your character and integrity in hip-hop culture, that type of criticism sticks with you for a while. Folks immediately start wondering whether the bag was really worth all the damage to your reputation. Now, recently Big Bank finally sat down with Ray Daniels and some others to fully explain why he agreed to do the interview in the first place. And according to them, 6ix9ine allegedly understood exactly what he was doing from a strategic standpoint. Ray Daniels explained that 6ix9ine knows he can't directly fight every Atlanta rapper individually and win public support. So instead, he allegedly decided to align himself with somebody respected by younger street audiences in the city. The idea was basically, if I sit down with Big Bank, then all of Atlanta eventually going to pay attention to my message whether they want to or not. That's why they felt the interview itself was never really about Big Bank personally. It was about visibility and access into a culture that had mostly rejected him already. Ray Daniels kept emphasizing to Big Bank that whether he realizes it or not, a lot of younger artists in street dudes still view him as an OG figure. Even if Bank personally feels like those guys are just his peers or partners, public perception tells a different story. And in hip-hop, perception matters almost more than reality sometimes. Ray basically warned him that by sitting with 6ix9ine publicly, it could unintentionally help validate him in spaces where people previously wanted nothing to do with him. Because when somebody respected agrees to platform you, fans automatically start debating whether you're slowly being accepted back into the culture again. That's why this situation became way deeper than just a normal podcast interview. Big Bank himself admitted the whole process made him uncomfortable from beginning to end. He said he spent months internally battling with himself trying to figure out if this move was smart or completely reckless. Part of him felt like stepping outside his comfort zone could maybe lead to bigger opportunities business-wise. But another part of him kept questioning whether the backlash would outweigh the benefits. He even admitted there are moments where he watches clips back and thinks to himself, "Damn Bank, what were you thinking?" But then another side of him feels proud for taking a risk most people would have been too scared to take publicly. So even now, you can tell he's still emotionally conflicted over the whole decision. And then Big Bank revealed something else that really got social media talking. He admitted all that stuff online where he acted like the interview randomly happened overnight was completely false. According to him, conversations about this interview had already been going on quietly behind the scenes for months. He said 6ix9ine's team actually reached out first and had been trying to set everything up for a long time. Big Bank admitted he kept going back and forth mentally about agreeing to it. One minute he was completely against it, saying, "Hell no." And the next minute he started convincing himself maybe it made sense from a business standpoint. That internal battle apparently lasted for months before the interview finally happened. He also confessed that he started testing public reaction online before fully committing to releasing anything. He would throw little hints and subtle comments onto social media just to see how people around him reacted. And according to him, some of the same people fans assumed would oppose the interview were actually encouraging him privately behind the scenes to go through with it. That's why he said the situation became even more confusing mentally. Publicly, everybody was acting outraged and standing on principles. But privately, some people allegedly viewed the interview as a smart business opportunity that could bring major attention and revenue. So now fans are left questioning who was genuinely standing on morals and who was secretly prioritizing money the entire time. Then the conversation started getting deeper once they shifted into the topic of survival and providing for family. Ray Daniels basically argued that once you become responsible for feeding a household, pride sometimes has to take a back seat to reality. He explained that if he ever had to work DoorDash, drive Uber, or do any uncomfortable job just to make sure his kids ate, he'd do it with no hesitation. So from his perspective, doing an interview you personally don't like for financial reasons shouldn't automatically be viewed as betrayal. His entire argument was that life sometimes forces people into uncomfortable situations, but responsibilities still have to be handled regardless of personal feelings. Then the discussion shifted into survival versus morality, and that's where the whole debate really became complicated. They basically asked, if people in the streets are risking freedom and even their lives every day over small amounts of money, why are people shocked over somebody doing one controversial interview that could potentially change their financial situation forever? That was the mindset they were pushing. In their eyes, it came down to choosing opportunity over ego. But honestly, once money gets involved, people suddenly start bending rules depending on who they personally support. And that right there is why social media became so divided over this entire situation. After that, the conversation moved into the difference between street mentality and business mentality. Ray Daniels explained that once you fully enter the business world, eventually you're going to have to interact with people you normally would never associate with personally. That's just the reality of business. He said the streets operate differently because once somebody crosses you, there's usually no coming back from that. No conversations, no collaborations, no opportunities. But business relationships are transactional by nature, and sometimes people put emotions aside for profit. So the real question they kept asking was simple. Are we talking from a street perspective or a business perspective right now? Because according to them, those are two entirely different worlds with two completely different rule books. And according to Big Bank himself, he ultimately decided to lean into the business side of things instead of the street side. He basically admitted that the opportunity and potential money outweighed the politics attached to it. But that's exactly why social media exploded the way it did afterward. Because the second that interview dropped, people immediately started digging up old clips of Big Bang criticizing other rappers for making very similar moves. And that's what really triggered the backlash. Most people weren't even upset strictly because he interviewed 6ix9ine. The bigger issue was the inconsistency people felt they were seeing. Folks online started saying you can't spend years preaching one code publicly and then suddenly switch the rules once the bag gets big enough. That's where all the hypocrisy accusations started flooding in heavy. One of the biggest clips resurfacing right now is when Big Bank previously spoke on the Gucci Mane and Pooh Surety situation. Back then, Big Bank sounded extremely firm about standing on principles. He basically argued that if something happens in the streets, then you're supposed to take your losses and accept the consequences without involving extra conversations publicly. He spoke heavily about karma, accountability, and respecting the energy you put into the world. So now people online are looking at the current situation like, hold on, what happened to all those same rules now? That's why so many fans feel like the standards suddenly changed the second money and attention became involved in the equation. And honestly, that's where the internet started accusing him of selective politicking. People hate when somebody constantly switches between being a street guy and a businessman, depending on which angle benefits them more at the time. One minute it's all about loyalty, codes, and standing on principles. Then the next minute it suddenly turns into, nah, this is just business. Social media basically started saying you can't keep changing hats whenever it's convenient for your situation. Because if you publicly criticize other people for prioritizing business over loyalty, then people naturally expect you to stand on that same exact energy yourself. Otherwise, audiences start looking at your entire platform differently. Then another major conversation started getting attention online about whether somebody can truly maintain street credibility while also being a media personality or journalist. That's when Killer Mike's perspective got brought into the discussion. He explained that even though he's no longer actively in the streets, there are still certain morals and boundaries he personally chooses to stand on regardless. But he also admitted things become complicated when podcasters and media personalities still have deep ties to gang culture or street politics. Because once those affiliations exist publicly, people will always judge your actions through that lens whether you want them to or not. And according to him, that pressure never completely disappears. A lot of people started saying that's exactly where Big Bang found himself trapped in the middle. Because once you publicly position yourself as somebody who stands on street principles, audiences expect consistency across the board. You can't give passes to certain artists while condemning other people for the exact same behavior. That's why fans kept bringing up names like Young Thug, 21 Savage, Gucci Mane, and now 6ix9ine all in the same debate. People even started asking questions like, if 6ix9ine openly says he paid Big Bang for this interview, are people going to keep the same outrage they had in other situations? Or are the goalposts suddenly going to move again depending on who's involved? And honestly, that's the exact conversation taking over social media right now. One of the strongest points made during all these discussions was when people started saying eventually you either fully leave street politics behind or you don't. They argued that trying to stay halfway in and halfway out creates contradictions every single time. Because if somebody claims they're fully focused on podcasting and media now, then maybe they shouldn't continue judging situations through a strict street code perspective anymore. But at the same time, if they still want to publicly speak on snitching, loyalty, and principles, then audiences are naturally going to hold them accountable to those exact same standards. And that's why this whole situation became bigger than just one controversial interview. It turned into a full conversation about authenticity and consistency. Then people circled right back to Gucci Mane again. Fans pointed out that Big Bang literally sat on his own platform before and criticized Gucci heavily for how he handled the Pooh Surety situation. According to critics, Big Bang previously argued that Gucci should have shut everything down immediately instead of entertaining any police-related conversations publicly at all. And people remember him sounding very firm about that stance too. So now critics are saying if Big Bang felt comfortable publicly judging Gucci over that situation, then why should he suddenly be protected from criticism now for sitting down with 6ix9ine? That's why so many people online keep saying the issue isn't even necessarily the interview itself. It's the contradiction attached to it that people can't stop talking about. Meanwhile, social media backlash has been nonstop ever since clips from the interview started spreading everywhere online. Some fans are defending Big Bang, saying media is media and business is business. Their argument is that controversy brings views. Views bring money, and in today's internet era, numbers matter more than emotions. But on the flip side, there's also a huge group of people saying he damaged his own credibility for a temporary payday. And honestly, what's really crazy is that 6ix9ine almost became secondary in the whole situation. The attention completely shifted onto Big Bang himself. Instead of people arguing over what 6ix9ine said during the interview, everybody started debating why Big Bang even decided to give him a platform in the first place. Then Jim Jones jumped into the conversation online too and started throwing subtle shots at the whole situation. He basically mocked the idea of so-called real ones suddenly sitting down with a rap for some quick money. And once that happened, even more media personalities started chiming in publicly. Cameron and Maze also discussed the controversy on their platform, and they definitely weren't holding back either. They questioned how somebody can spend years promoting street principles publicly and then suddenly pivot once money enters the conversation. Cam especially seemed focused on the double standard aspect of everything. His main point was simple. Once you publicly criticize other people for certain moves, you automatically place yourself under that exact same microscope too. Now, social media is completely split down the middle over the situation. Some people genuinely believe big banks simply made a smart business decision in an industry driven by controversy and attention. Others feel like he crossed a line and exposed himself as somebody willing to bend his principles for profit. And honestly, that's why this story blew up the way it did, because it touched on a much bigger issue inside hip-hop media right now: the blurry line between entertainment, journalism, street politics, and branding. One minute people are screaming about loyalty and morals, and the next minute all those rules suddenly change once enough money enters the picture. That's why people are reacting so strongly to the situation. And finally, even more personalities like Turk and Whack 100 eventually weighed in on the controversy too. A lot of them basically said they still respect Big Bank overall, but they also understand why audiences are questioning his credibility after this move. Because once people start feeling like your opinions can change depending on how much money is involved, they begin reevaluating everything you say moving forward. And in media, reputation is everything. Once doubt gets attached to your name publicly, the internet rarely ever lets it go completely. That's why this backlash is hitting as hard as it is right now. But I want to know what y'all think about this entire situation down in the comments section. Do y'all think Big Bank really lost credibility after openly admitting he chose business over street politics when it came to interviewing 6ix9ine? Or do you think people are overreacting and business should stay completely separate from emotions? Especially after all those old Gucci Mane clips resurface again, a lot of fans are definitely calling this straight up hypocrisy. Make sure y'all hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn notifications on so you never miss the latest hip-hop drama, rap beefs, and viral industry stories.